Welcome back to Pain Free for Life, where we share how to successfully overcome all kinds of chronic and extreme conditions to live happy, productive, pain-free lives forever. And now, here's your host, co-founder, and board-certified holistic healthcare practitioner, Dr. Rob Vanbergen.
Hello, and welcome back to the Pain Free for Life podcast. This is our brand new monthly QA podcast episode where I take submitted questions and I answer them live on the spot and with the hope of giving you the answers you need. Remember, I do not believe there is any such thing as a stupid question. Chances are that if you are thinking it, dozens of other people are thinking it too. So feel free to submit these online. Be specific, be vague, and let me help you out. I might mention names in here, but they're only going to be first names. And if it's a super obvious first name, like where it's really unique, I will not be doing that. I don't want to cause any problems. So I'm just going to focus on answering these questions. Now, we're going to see how long this takes. I'm aiming for about 15 to 30 minutes per time we do these. Again, we're doing one a month. So it's going to be interesting to see if people enjoy these. There's a lot of questions out there, and I have a handful that I'm going to answer today. So first question from Jack is, Dr. Rob, what is your favorite attachment and why? I actually get asked this question a lot, but it's usually in the context of like, what are you if you want only going to invest a certain amount of money, what would you invest in? Now, I kind of automatically have to say that there are two different categories, okay? Because there are certain things that I think stand alone by themselves, and you either need them or you just ignore them, depending on what you're looking to do. So my two categories would be the more pricey attachments like the Sanichi, the Scalechi, the Viachi, and the Chi Wave, and then all other attachments thrown into the other pile, with the unique exception of the goggles, which fill a super niche role. You can only really do eye treatments as effectively with the goggles. It really does make a tremendous difference. So we're not going to count the goggles in this answer because if you have eye problems, you want the goggles. Done. And I will answer in two ways. So first off, the regular attachments, and then we'll move on to the more expensive ones. So I would say, if I had to be completely honest with a favorite attachment, base that really off of just what I use all the time, it's going to have to be the Y probe. Now, it seems really basic and boring, but the Y probe is what I would use for most treatments that I am doing. It would have a close second following with the massager electrode, but I do feel like that's a little bit better as a practitioner versus a home user. And I know most of our listeners and clients are, in fact, home users treating themselves or treating their family. So I would say if you had to invest in only one attachment, a Y electrode is the way to go. Whether it's 6-inch or 8-inch, there's the two different sizes. Honestly, they're equally popular. I used to kind of think people preferred the 8-inch, but we have people that much prefer the 6-inch one now, and some that prefer the 8-inch. It's really just going to see what feels right to you, what you're trying to do, right? An extra few inches of reach with the 8-inch can get into your shoulders a little bit better if you're self-treating. But I find for treating my vagus nerve, I prefer the 6-inch because it keeps my hand in a more comfortable position. And the 6-inch also has a little bit more weight to it, and I actually like that with attachments. I don't like them to feel super light, and the 8-inch does feel lighter. And, really it depends on the issues. There are some plug issues that happen from time to time with the 8-inch that don't happen with the 6-inch simply just because of the way it has been designed. So realistically, number one attachment would be a Y probe. If you're looking for something that doesn't come in the kits, I would say massager electrode. And then if we're looking at the Sanichi, the Scalechi, all of those ones, I have a Sanichi now, and I just use the Sanichi. I actually got rid of my Scala and Viachi. There's no point having all of them sitting here because I can use both with the Sanichi. But if I was like budget conscious, Jack, if you were looking there and saying, hey, look, I want one of these top attachments, which one's it going to be? It's always going to fall into the Scalar. If you don't want to go with the Sanichi and get everything, go with the Scalar because you can find other PEMFs. PEMF isn't really the best healing modality. It's pretty good, but it doesn't have the same effect as microcurrent. And Scalar is so unique and so powerful that almost every single time that you are treating someone or treating yourself, you're going to find a use for scalar. You'll get the biggest bang for your buck with the scalar chi device. So that has to take top in that category. But again, you can't just say what's the best attachment and then not separate them that way, because they're just completely different beasts, right? The scalar chi, sana chi, via chi, PEM, FPAD, these alter the therapy from microcurrent to something else. And then everything else is really just essentially adapting the microcurrent to different positions. Okay, so next question. So hopefully that answers your question, Jack. But the next question is from Stuart, and it's, what's the best way to treat chronic neck pain? Now, in my experience, what we see is that chronic neck pain is most likely posture or essentially just positioning related, more so than it is like some sort of inflammatory disease. Now, obviously, there are conditions that you could have, but typically the positioning of your body, the way you sit, your posture, the way you crane your neck, these things are going to cause the most damage to the body. We actually see, if you tilt your head forward just one like little notch each time, you're adding about 5 to 10 pounds of weight onto your spine, and this causes postural damage. So it's always going to start with little wings to me. And a lot of the time, this really makes a major difference because it releases the tension, it realigns things. But in the end, that's going to be the number one way to treat chronic neck pain. I would do it daily if it's chronic, but bear in mind, right, if it's chronic from an injury, like you've had a fracture or something, I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't want to really move the spine in too much of an aggressive way. And little wings can be a little bit of an aggressive protocol. But little wings can be done by any device that we have. So it's a really good place to start. The other thing that I tend to find works really well, and it runs contrary to what we typically talk about in trainings, is to utilize the modulating modes and do some stationary treatment. Now, painting is almost always going to be that number one starting place, right? You paint the area out, you get rid of the sticky zones. But when you've got pain that's not really budging, I really like to use modes that modulate, like 121 hertz, to push the current deeper. Now, what we would do in that case typically, Stuart, is we would want to do a dose and a zero first, and then I would do some 121, holding it in place, even for just 60 seconds, and then going in and doing the stimulate treatment that we would normally do at the end of a dose and zero. But sometimes it's just getting those frequencies deeper in and alleviating that pressure. And again, doesn't devalue the painting, but it makes a big difference to be able to push these frequencies deeper in those tight spaces. So it's really about isolating that highest point of tension. So what I would be looking for isn't necessarily where the pain is, but where the pain is the worst when you move it. So like if you move your head a bit to the left and you start to feel it all tighten up and tense up, find that point of tension and hit that spot instead of necessarily the area where the pain is. You can get tons of referred pain that's just not really going to be resolved because you're going to be treating the area it hurts and missing out on the area that tension is coming from. Okay, so hopefully that was a good answer and that helps you. I'm not sure which device you have, but pretty much what I recommend, it could be done with any of them. So you're in luck. Okay, so this question is from a name that is a little bit more unique, so I'm not going to say it. But the question is simply, why did you create the Genesis 2? Now, I believe you may have a Genesis, but you also have an Evolution. So maybe you're just questioning like, well, why did you bother with the Genesis 2? Well, actually, I think next week I have a new podcast episode coming out on the Genesis 2. And also we've got some articles coming out on it as well. I just did a 10-minute training on it. So feel free to look up that. There's lots of resources now on the Genesis 2. But why create it? Well, we were in this position where with the need for people that were not able to afford the most expensive devices to get things like vagus nerve stimulation and some regenerative therapies. Well, this need was so high that we decided we needed to put the 7 to 12 hertz frequency into a lower device. And we actually wanted to do this for some time, but it's always been challenging to work with what is considered a neurofeedback frequency and push that through the FDA into this category of device. The Genesis 2 is considered an over-the-counter device, so it has some different clearances than the Evolution and the Pinnacle do, which just makes it better for mass production, essentially. So when we created the Genesis 2, it was really an easy option because we looked at a device that people only chose if it was all they could afford, or which was the original Genesis, or they just had a very basic need, like treating some scar tissue in an old surgical site or something. And we took a device that wasn't really being sold, and we essentially converted it into something that has a feature that everyone wanted. The question was, well, why do people jump from the Genesis to the nearly double the price Evolution and stretch their budget to do so? Well, it's because they want vagus nerve. They want the ability to enhance their sleep. They want the ability to relax their body, put themselves into an alpha state, ground the body. All of these things come from one mode set, and that magical mode set. Then it also makes up so much of our protocols. Even our program, like the Hache Protocol Reset, we didn't really encourage people to join it if you had a Genesis device because you couldn't do vagus nerve, which meant you couldn't work on the nervous system. So you couldn't really fix the root cause if you had a systemic issue. With the access of the Genesis 2 coming in at the same price that the Genesis 1 was at, we have allowed every one of our devices to do these intense protocols like vagus nerve, like the alpha ear clips, all these things that are going to make a substantial difference for you as individuals who are treating. And so far, the feedback has been great. I'm really excited. We've caught up on all of those shipments that needed to go out. So everyone that was owed a Genesis 2 has one. And I'm pleased to say that they are quickly taking the mantle of one of our most popular devices, which is awesome. Okay, so question from Sue. Hi, Sue. I recognize your last name. I won't say it here, but nice to see you listening to the podcast. So your question was, I absolutely love PEMF, and I use my Chi-Wave pad primarily. Rarely, if ever, do I touch my microcurrent device and use it directly outside of powering the Chi-Wave. Is this okay? What am I missing out on? Well, Sue, I always say it comes down to the individual. Like, do you have benefit from the Chi-Wave pad? If yes, keep going. Now, as far as are you missing out, you probably are to a degree. The Chi-Wave pad sort of saturates the body with frequencies, and the more you do this, the more your body gets used to the frequencies, and it kind of figures out what's happening, so it starts to respond a little bit faster, which is awesome. But as far as like how do you actually take advantage of the microcurrent as well, one thing would be to do simple dosing and zeroing. And just getting that like dose, zero, stimulate cycle from your manual on the area you want to treat before you use your Chi-Wave pad. This will just make sure your brain is focusing on the area there. But the main thing that microcurrent can do is it can do things like stimulate the vagus nerve. PEMF can't do that. It can manipulate muscles. PEMF can't do that. So there are certain things that I like to change between these things for, and that is really just the blend of them. Like, you're not going to be able to do that vagus nerve stim, so you are missing out on things like that. You're not going to be able to create that biofeedback connection where the brain focuses on an area of your body. But again, if you're getting benefit, and you're not alone, like I know of people that have been clients for a long time that have exclusively used the Chi-Wave pad since it was released and very rarely ever use their microcurrent. I do still think you are probably missing out, and maybe get a little bit more adventurous with your microcurrent. I think you will find that beneficial, but there are definitely benefits to both. So you don't, if it's working for you, it's working for you, right? You can keep going and doing what you do. But I would say that, if it were up to me, I would try and incorporate both, even just in small amounts of microcurrent as well. Okay, so next question. Dr. Rob, I have trigger finger. Sorry to hear that. Trigger finger is quite a pain, isn't it? So what microcurrent protocols do you recommend? I have the Evolution. So good information. So you have the Evolution device. So when you have the Evolution, because you got the 8 different modes, there's actually quite a few you want to use for trigger finger. So depending on where the trigger finger is, you're always going to notice one or more bands, right? That are kind of pulling the trigger finger into a bend. And to work these out is a multi-step process. Now you can treat them as scar tissue. So you want to neutralize them with 77 hertz, but you also want to try and work on breaking them up. Blue stimulation is good for this. And this would be one that could be used in any device. But 350 hertz in the evolution is really good at helping to soften up that tissue. And I've had multiple people with trigger finger that's been really bad that have released that trigger finger following the basics of that. Just paint those bands and soften up the tissue. And you should be able to get that fixed without having to have surgery and get that range of motion back. But you will likely need to continue to treat it. It seems to want to keep coming back. So keep treating it daily, but just for 3-5 minutes, and watch for those benefits to come in as you start to get that flexibility back and the bands kind of break up and stop causing all of those issues. Okay, so question here from Sally. Please explain the process of dosing and zeroing. So it's a fairly complex question. So let's just really boil it down to a basic, because there's going to be people here that are listening to this podcast that have no idea what dosing and zeroing is. So dosing and zeroing is the biofeedback function of our devices. It is in all of our devices. What does biofeedback mean? It means essentially it's working with your body, it's talking with your body, and it's having a conversation. Now, the devices, depending on which one, like the Pinnacle, has this ability to have a screen, and so therefore gives you a lot of information. But the Genesis and the Evolution don't have the screen, but they still can perform the dosing and zeroing process. Now, this is based off of the Pinnacle version, which was the original kind of way of doing this, where it was a D and a Z, and that stood for dose and zero. And these would pop up on the screen with numbers next to them, and they would be recorded by the practitioner, and you would carry on that way. Now we know that if we just focus on the dosing and zeroing for that communication. And it is really a signal being sent into your body, the signal reaching your brain, and then your brain sending a signal back to the device. So it's creating a circuit focusing the communication on that area. So when you do a dose, you are essentially sending a message through wherever it is on the body. You get a successful dose and it runs up to the brain, and you're not going to feel it in your brain, but it's just gone into your nervous system. It's traveling through your nerves and your fascia, and then you're going to get that ping, and that will be a dose, and it will show up on your device. And then you hold the device in place because you've gone up and you've knocked on your brain's door, and it's opened the door, and now you've asked it to come with you because you need help. So now you've got to wait for that signal and your brain to wander that signal back to the device, where the device will receive that electrical response from your body that was not the electricity it put in, and the circuit is established. So if you had, say, a hand injury and you were having a hard time resolving it, dosing and zeroing can make your brain look at the hand and say, hey, there's a problem with that hand. Because with chronic issues, the brain tends to forget a lot of the time why you are in pain, and it just kind of runs that pain program. It doesn't think, oh, Sally hurt her wrist 2 years ago skiing. She sprained it and it's been hurting ever since. It's like, oh, your wrist is in pain. Let's block that so that nothing bad happens by making it hurt, so you stop using it. And then it almost just is like, hey, now what's over there? It's like your brain has ADHD, right? And it runs off and it does other things and forgets about your hand. And this is especially amplified when people take medications, because the medications that are pain blockers will actually prevent your brain from really registering those pain signals. So it maybe says, make a bunch of pain in Sally's wrist or hand, and then the pain starts, and then Sally's like, hey, I'm not picking on you, just using you as an example, right? I'm not saying you do this, but then you're saying, hey, my hand hurts, and you take some ibuprofen, and then you just keep on that cycle for a few days of every time it starts to hurt, take the ibuprofen. So your brain then looks at it and says, oh, I guess I turned that off, right? But really, it still hurts. And so as it comes back, it's no longer paying attention. Dosing and zeroing forces it to pay attention, and it can accelerate the healing process and even kickstart it when it's been kind of dead in the water for a long time. All right, we've got a few more questions here for this first episode. I'm really enjoying this. This is awesome. So I hope I get some more awesome and great questions next week and the week after that I can incorporate into our February Q&A podcast episode. So the next question. So why not make the devices plug into the wall so I don't have to buy batteries? Oh, I've heard this question before. So it's a very deliberate choice not to make them plugged into the wall. First off, there are different outlets around the world. So if you're in the UK, you would need a completely different device to someone who, and the same with Australia, I believe, to someone who is in North America. This would mean the creation of multiple separate devices with different plugs and voltages. So the AA batteries we use enable us to really establish a baseline around the world. So that's the first point to that. The second is a concern of mine of EMFs, and we've actually been approached by a few people within the last 10 years who are looking to build microcurrent devices, and they're asking if we would take them on as a product. But every single time they have had Wi-Fi or Bluetooth components, or they plug into the wall. So they're potentially creating harmful electromagnetic fields, something that to many people isn't a big deal. But as you start to see, if you follow the podcast this year, I've got quite a few scary interviews about some of these things from people who have had a lot of issues with electromagnetic fields. And we're starting to see it more and more and more in our clients in the US as well as Europe. And it's recognized as an issue in Europe. It's an actual medical condition. And I think in Australia, you could even go on disability for being sensitive to electromagnetic fields. But in North America, it's not real and no one listens to it. So by using the batteries, we create a very low output. And that is just extremely helpful for us to be able to create a safe therapy for any and everyone, even the most sensitive. And just keep in mind, the batteries last a long time. I would say the two AA batteries can last months if you're using the device for just short periods of time a day. And even if you're using it pretty intensely, you should get a couple of weeks out of a pair of batteries. My dad, Dr. Hashay, always used to say one of the best things you can do for yourself is to buy a Costco membership if you buy a device and just buy the bulk packets of batteries. It'll save you a bunch of money and you'll always have them on hand when you need them. So, maybe some good advice. Or any AA batteries work. We just don't recommend rechargeables. There can be some varying issues that can occur. Although I do know many that have used them and don't have any issues with it. So that's up to you guys. Okay. So final question for the day. Linda asks, do you think RA can be resolved completely? So I believe, Linda, you're probably meaning rheumatoid arthritis when you say RA. That's what most people mean. So I'm going to answer it from that perspective. Hopefully, that's what you meant. I don't know if there is anything else with those same abbreviations, but with the thousands of medical conditions out there, I would not be surprised. So forgive me if I answer the wrong question here. Now, rheumatoid arthritis is a autoimmune disease, right? So it is actually impacting your body from your immune system attacking your joints. What does rheumatoid arthritis really do? It just does long-term damage to joints, and it can cause deformity as well as pain and the inability to use your hands as well as other parts of the body, though it most commonly affects the fingers in the hand. So microcurrent can work to resolve inflammation, and autoimmune diseases, especially through vagus nerve, are extremely accessible. All that being said, I do believe rheumatoid arthritis can be resolved. However, I've seen it. My dad's done it, and multiple clients have done it as well. The way to do it is not just microcurrent. Now, microcurrent is our magic bullet. It does so much, and it will provide a ton of relief. But one of the biggest issues with RA is often food allergies, dietary issues, throughout the body, systemic problems that need to be resolved through some actual treatments of changing your food or getting some exercise. So essentially a treatment plan. This is something that we emphasize a lot in the Hashay protocol reset, which is just really important for a lot of people. And I do think a lot of people in the holistic space that are looking for this equipment or are already using this equipment, you're probably already doing all of that stuff too. And so then you have that leg up on that ability to resolve issues. But if you're looking at this and saying, well, I take methotrexate and I take it every day, I've taken it every day for 20 years, I eat junk food all the time, I never exercise, you're going to need to make some changes to get that resolution. Doesn't mean that the device itself isn't going to provide you relief, but you need to work with your body to protect it in order to boost that and move towards resolution. Okay, so this was really great fun. Thank you for joining me, everyone. I love Q&As all the time anyway, so this is a fun way of doing a podcast. I just want to remind everyone as well that if you're looking for a sneak peek of all podcast episodes, events, and more, download our brand new, totally free digital magazine. We're releasing a new issue every single month. There's tons of information and protocols in the magazine. It is 100% free, and we have zero intention of ever charging for it. You just have to subscribe to be able to get the issue. You can download them, you can print them, you can do whatever you want to do with them. It's there, it's for you guys. And it has a schedule of the podcasts, of all of the trainings in the groups, so you know what's coming up ahead and seeing if something appeals to you as well. Okay, so don't miss out on that. All right, so until next time, everyone, I'm Dr. Rob Vanbergen. Thank you for tuning in to Pain Free for Life.
Thanks for listening to Pain Free for Life. Be sure to follow us, share the show with family and friends, and leave us a review on iTunes. Every time you share the show, you are helping someone take their life back from pain. Visit painfreeforlife.com for more resources, including our free guides to microcurrent, the Hache protocol and inflammation, as well as our blog and online community full of people just like you, successfully overcoming all kinds of chronic and extreme conditions to live happy, productive, pain-free lives forever. And stay tuned for the next episode of Pain Free for Life.